So today's episode of the HSP Connection is going to be a little different because it's just me. Those of you who are watching on YouTube will realize it's just me. It's not Robbie today. I'm here on my own because I'm having a conversation with this wonderful woman who is Sarah Green. And Sarah Green is a coach who currently focuses her work around self-knowledge and career. I met Sarah in a coaching network that Sarah set up just over, well, perhaps even almost nearly 18 months ago now. And we started talking about Sarah possibly coming on the podcast. And here she is today. Sarah, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Very happy to be here.
It's great. I'm really, it's brilliant that you're here. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Such a great topic because, you know, this sort of speaks to all of the things that are really important to me. So this is great. So what I'm just going to do is introduce the topic. And when I asked you about coming on the podcast and what you might talk about, I'm just going to read it actually. This is basically what you said to me, that you had been noticing with clients that years of conditioning and layers of expectation are really shaping your clients' thinking and offering them a space to explore that and reconnect with who they are underneath all that. Wonderful. That puts them in a place where they are better able to make decisions that suit them rather than everyone else. And you added, it's almost as if the coaching space offers permission for them to challenge their own thinking and find their own voice. So anybody who knows me and has listened to my podcast episodes will know that all those things, permission and who you really are and voice and conditioning and expectations, are all like right in my wheelhouse. So this is just going to be an amazing conversation. And thank you for bringing this subject. I think it's amazing. And I just wondered maybe if you could start us off, maybe either you could tell us your take on that and what you're seeing with clients. And I don't know, maybe some of your own experience, if you have any, and we'll take it from there.
Okay, perfect. Yes. Okay. So I think really when I wrote that kind of idea for the topic, it was a little bit of a summary of some of the themes that have been coming up over and over again. So I think in coaching, as you'll appreciate, you know, whatever people bring to the table, whether it's career or leadership or personal development, you know, ultimately there is a process of change that will take place. There's a process of changing how we think and how we view ourselves. And quite often there's the theory that gets brought with the client, or sometimes I'm challenged myself to consider, is that, you know, are we ultimately changing who we are, or actually are we getting back to who we are underneath all of the like all the things that you've just touched on? So quite often I will work with somebody who has this vision of who they are, who they would like to be. And I think it was helpful to present the, you know, the kind of challenge, well, actually, is that who you already are? It's not a case of going through this huge change and putting all this work to become somebody different. You know, that isn't the space that we're in. What it actually is, well, let's peel back these layers and these beliefs and some of these stories that we're holding on to. And actually, we're already there. You know, we already exist. And when I say that, I can appreciate it sounds a little bit, you know, fairy tale-esque, but I have experience of it myself, you know, my own personal development journey. But regardless of client, this just always comes up. And I think there's a moment of relief and almost liberation when people are able to go, okay, so that feels like less work. You know, I'm already in there. And we just have to find that again. There's not this, it's not something external. We already have it.
Yeah. And you make a very good point there. I think that a lot of clients come feeling a certain way and wanting to change that for whatever the reason is. And I think, like you, I find a lot of my clients are coming to coaching with ideas about how they feel about themselves, how they feel about their life, how they feel about their careers. And a lot of those ideas are coming from a focus outside, from an external focus.
Yeah.
Which is why you talked in sort of what you said to me you want to come and talk about. That's why we're talking about conditioning, and we're talking about layers of expectations from other people, rather than actually looking inside and who are we. And do you, I mean, I can't imagine all your clients go, oh yeah, okay, great, let's skip on inside and see what's in there. What sort of blocks do you come up against?
Well, I think this is where previously I'd kind of linked it into that permission box, because I can quite often, suggest that this is what might go on in a coaching journey, and we might go through this process of change, and this change can look different for everybody. It takes time, different for different people. Some people turn up and they've done a lot of work already. They're really into that self-development space. They're really kind of already halfway there. So the language that we would use is common for them. But actually for some people, they're like, okay, I'm hearing you, but I'm not quite sure what that means. And then there's a little bit of time where they, may come back after a couple of sessions and be like, actually, I've reflected on what you've said, and I've realized that actually that I'm holding on to up here, it's not really what I want to do. It's what, is expected of me in the family, or it's what I believe to be successful. But when I'm allowed and I have permission to think freely without judgment, what I actually believe is this. So it's different, I suppose we all get there, but we're all starting from a different place. And actually for some of us, it can be a bit easier. Sometimes there can be a lot there for people to work through. So I'm very conscious about that kind of, creating that psychological safety for people. But more often than not, once they're up and running with the idea, it's like, wow, suddenly I had these like 3 possibilities that I believe to be true for myself. But actually now there's like loads more, because I have permission to explore these things that I would, have previously believed weren't for me, or shouldn't be for me, or were not expected of me. Once we park that, and we put those, and that's often how I'll frame it. Like, we can acknowledge those things to be true. Let's park them on one side. Let's acknowledge them, but leave them on the side. And when we create some space, what else is in there? Yeah. So it is that permission to explore, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think the coaching spaces are really wonderful if you find the right coach, and,
of course,
people who you're the right coach for, not necessarily I'm not going to be the right coach for. And that's why there's room for so many of us coaches. And I think sometimes do you tend to, have you ever come across a situation where, yes, you park all those things that maybe on the table, or have been on the table because of what everybody else wants, and instead of there being many options, there's actually one very clear thing?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And what I've noticed is that quite often it's not necessarily people have a clarity over what they definitely want, but they're really clear about what they don't want. That is kind of the light bulb moment. And actually, depending which way you look at it, it can be quite sad for some people, myself included in this, where you've probably spent 20 years in a career, for example, that you really don't like, and you can't understand why you don't like it, when on paper it looks really successful. And when you realize what it is that you don't like about that, the things that do become important have a different clarity. They've been clouded. So yeah, it's fascinating. It's fascinating. But yeah, I think using the kind of layer reference is really important, because it's not like a magician, where you just pull the tablecloth and there's this whole new, it really is let's go steady here, because some of it can be a little bit tricky. Some of it also, have to be kind of, in terms of integrity, occasionally there might be a conversation that isn't appropriate for the coaching space. I think sometimes, some people may then realize that there's a little bit of work to be done, maybe in a separate space, as coaching can be obviously very progressive, isn't it? And I think for some people, once they've suddenly realized that things can be very different for them, and actually some of the stuff they are holding on to, that they need to work through that before coming back into the coaching space. So
yeah. So do you mean probably therapy or something,
Yeah.
or something, some other modality other than coaching to
Yeah.
help them with whatever has come up, and
Yeah.
then they maybe come back to coaching.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
yeah, okay, I thought that's what you meant. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, I mean, 9 times out of 10, it doesn't happen. But I'm just kind of, there's a couple of times in the last few years where I think actually once people get to a point where you are lifting the layers, sometimes that it can almost be a bit overwhelming. And I think the pattern is that, for most of us, well, big generalization for me and a lot of people I've worked with, we kind of leave school and we straight away go into a pathway that is set around expectations. And we don't really think to question it. We don't know how to question it. It's not on our radar. Hopefully it'll be different for, my little boy and the kind of next generation. But so it's only until we get into our late 30s, maybe 40s, that we get to the point where we go, hang on a minute, now what? Actually, when we're working for the 20, 30 years, career is a big part of our life. And we're not happy. It's like you're trying to link the two together. And that's, like I say, it's not about the career, it's about all the underlying stuff.
Yeah, yes, you're right. And it also brings in lots of other things, like our idea around what is success, and what actually are we wanting out of life, and what do we want as opposed to what do we think we should have, and all of those. I mean, there's so many layers here. I had a client who actually I've just finished working with, and she came to me because she wanted to talk about her job. And she said the biggest thing she got out of her time with me, that actually her job was fine, it was everything else that she needed to focus on and work on. And in fact, she's gone and got an amazing job and is moving to live by the sea, which is what she wanted anyway. So it's all kind of come together. But yeah, it is really amazing what can happen when I'm talking about clients here. So we as a client, or a person in that situation, can take, because I've been there.
Yeah.
And you've been there as well, and by the sounds of it. So can take that time to just stop and okay, like assess in a way. And as you put it, give yourself permission to look, to delve around a little bit, and to sort of take a bird's eye view of things, maybe, and go, okay, so what's working here and what isn't.
Yeah.
And what sort of things do you, around the permission piece, do you find there are any I don't know if there are any common threads that come out with clients?
I think there's definitely something around people being able to speak up for themselves. It comes up in all sorts of scenarios, really, where I think being allowed to put your hand up and say, I don't like this, I do like this, I've had enough of that, actually a large majority, it's we just get on with it, like this is what's expected and we get on with it. So having that permission where somebody says to you, well, actually, how do you really feel about that? Like, with no judgment, no opinion, no feedback, no input from the other person in the room, really speak freely. This is it now, you can say whatever you want. And actually, for some people, that can be the first time they've been given actual free reign. And it can take practice. And I think there's a lot of us, me included, that spend a lot of our time just doing the stuff, just getting on with the stuff, just doing what we think we should be doing with right intention. It's not a wrong or a right, but actually when somebody then says to us, well, how do you feel about that? You've got permission to really be honest with me. Makes a difference to me ultimately. This is your time, your space. You can see then where that, thinking without interruption and that little bit of creativity, maybe speaking with, metaphors and things like that they're not used to doing, they're able to build a very different picture of what life could look like for them. So I guess it's being allowed to, think freely, take some structure out, take some expectation out, and then see what comes up.
I for one grew up feeling I didn't have a voice, so for me to finally find my voice in my 50s is like quite incredible. And I don't mean I've been silent, because I'm
Yeah.
I'm not that type, but to the true me, to find that voice and be able to own in myself how I feel about things, what I want for myself. And to, it's okay for me to want what I want as well as the rest of my family to want what they want. So I think coming out of that place of expectations and people play, I'm definitely a recovering people pleaser, and all of those patterns that we will bring from our childhood. Usually it's quite it's a liberating space to be able to lay some of those things down and go, okay, now what? And also it can be a bit I don't know if scary is the right word. It can be a bit overwhelming, and the audience for this podcast are highly sensitive people, and overwhelm is something that we are absolutely used to, and it can be overwhelming to be in that space of putting everything to one side and go, okay,
question.
It is, and that's where having a safe space to do that is really important, isn't it?
And it's when each year I do like reflective work, obviously in terms of my own coaching supervision, and reflect on themes that come up for people, because I work with obviously a variety of clients, and it's amazing that the feedback I get is consistently around being offered the time and the space just for themselves. In any given working week, whether you're a full-time mum or regardless of the role, but actually in any given week, where we're doing lots of different things for lots of different people, how often do we actually sit down and go, okay, how am I feeling about this? What's going really well? Where might I like to change something? Who might I need to ask for a little bit of support? And do that with actual conscious intention, very rarely. So if ever, in my own experience, until I discovered coaching. Yet now that's the feedback I get from people, is like, if I hadn't have come and had that conversation and really thought about stuff, I would have made a different set of decisions that wouldn't have been right for me. And so the kind of gold dust effect is the time and the space ultimately, and being held for that person to focus on their own needs for themselves for that amount of time, which really, as you'll know with the clients that you work with, we just have a problem with taking time for ourselves and focusing on ourselves. We have so much stuff attached to it around, I should be doing something else with my time, I shouldn't be being selfish, all of that. And when we get to a point where we're like, God, wow, thinking with a bit of clarity and no judgment and, intention helps me make better decisions. Doesn't matter what it's about, but the process is improved. It's cleaner, it's quieter, it's more focused. And that is a definite theme.
Yeah, those shoulds really get in the way, don't they?
Massively.
Yeah, and those shoulds, I think, are very much what keep most of us like rushing forward or rushing here and doing this and doing that and being human doings rather than human beings. We're not very good at being, I don't think, anymore, are we? I hope it's changing. I mean, you're a good 10 years plus younger than me. Do you feel that pressure to be doing?
It's funny you should say that, because I was only having a conversation with somebody about it this morning. So it is something that I'm really committed to working on. And so I could physically do less. I could quite easily say, I'm going to stop doing that and I'm going to stop doing that. But whether I'd be comfortable with it and therefore be okay with it is the kind of work, I suppose, in the sense that I'm really committed to role modeling to my little boy as well, in terms of what we mean by busy and what that represents, and but also my own internal dialogue, my own inner critic, in terms of, gosh, if I sit down, if I've walked the dog and I've done this and I've done that, I've done the housework, had a couple of clients, and and I still think, well, I've got an hour. I think it'll take me a while before I get to the point where I go, I've got an hour. I could actually sit in the garden or do a bit of weeding, but I'm still at that point where I think, should I? Shouldn't I? So even, you know, for me, like kind of 13 years down the coaching route, I'm still at a point where I'm challenging my own beliefs. But it's better for the running of the house and the harmony of the family if we're all allowed to do what's right for us individually. It means we operate better as a collective. Yeah, which has been really helpful. So yeah, less is more is my commitment to Summer.
Yeah, right. How wonderful. And you know, it's all a big experiment, really, isn't it? Sometimes, you know, we have to try things sometimes to find out what works.
Yeah.
And I did notice that when you started talking about that, and you said you could physically stop, and you did this action. So you, for anybody who's listening on audio, you sort of got your finger and sort of wound it round about shoulder height. And I wonder if that is like physically you can stop, but it's your brain.
Exactly.
It's your thoughts, it's your mind that keeps going. And is it those thoughts of, oh, you've got an hour, you could do this, and this, as opposed to your thoughts being, you've got an hour, go and sit down and enjoy the sunshine while we've got it, or whatever.
Yeah, it is. It's the internal conversations that we all have with ourselves, isn't it? And it's learning to challenge that, you know, and recognizing it and accepting it, you know, is part of the way that we're made as humans. You know, we have these inner dialogues, don't we? But that, again, permission, I'm allowed to challenge it, just because that's what I always believed in the conversation I always had. Like, that's the liberating moment of, actually, I'm choosing to challenge that. Thanks for your input, you know, thanks for that kind of internal conversation that ultimately is, you know, is keeping me motivated. You know, I trust in the fact it has a positive intention, but actually I want to make different choices, you know. So having that challenge, I appreciate, takes time, but, you know, it's like anything, isn't it? You have the awareness of something, you're committed to doing something differently as a result of the awareness, but it's the practice. But yeah, I would say this summer has been really helpful. There's been lots of opportunities for me to put into practice.
Right.
We have busy work life, busy home life, as you know, social calendar for the kids, school, etc. So we've had to make a conscious effort as to, where do we make more space? How do we do that? It's not just I need to do it, so I'll do it. It's a conscious discussion that's right for all of us. Because I'm conscious that, you know, there's me as myself, but I'm also a mum and a partner and have those things to consider. So yeah, but I think we're all feeling the benefits in the family unit of saying no, not feeling bad about that, and having more downtime.
That sounds I've noticed your posts on Instagram are a little bit more leaning that way, and you've been talking about that more, and I do think that's really I was going to say really important. So I'm not saying that everybody should do that. It's very much an individual thing, isn't it? And it is interesting how because you said about giving yourself permission to question some things. Yes, that is the way I've always done it, but actually maybe I don't have to do it like that. And there are lots of things, I'm sure all of us, all the listeners, you and I could bring that curiosity to.
Yes.
About, this is the way I've always done it. But why? Where does that come from? Where have I got that from? Is this the way I wanted to do it? Is this the way I want to carry on doing it? What might happen if I don't do it like this?
Yeah.
What is the space to come in? You know, what can come into that space?
Yeah. And I think as well, it's important. I try very much to, you know, I guess, do what I would practice in a coaching space with clients. I'm really conscious, and I'm not sure how you feel about that, but it's like anything, isn't it? We're great at supporting other people through certain changes, and when we're in that space, we're so focused on the other person. I'm also thinking, so this is the choice I'm making to practice with myself. You know, it's that holding that mirror up, isn't it? I can have conversations regularly with people around, how would it be if we challenged that belief? How would it be if we rewrote that story going forward, etc.? And then I'm thinking to myself, yeah, Sarah, how would it be? How about you just challenge that belief of sitting in the garden with a cup of tea for half an hour at 2 o'clock in the afternoon? Like, how's that going?
Yeah.
It's a nice reflection in the work that I do, and you know, maybe that you share, that it's a constant learning journey as well for me, you know, for your certificates and your qualifications, or however, you know, we enter into this line of work. Actually, it's the learning and the putting it into practice where the value is. And I love that about the, you know, the clients, and then the reflective work afterwards, thinking, wow, how do I resonate with that? You know, how do I kind of, you know, relate to what it is that they're saying? So I understand on a theoretical level, and I can support people on a theoretical level, but actually, what about me? You know, how am I practicing this in my life? So it's a great full circle of learning.
Yeah, yes, you're right. And I think that's why we evolve as coaches, because we just do, because, and also that, you know, there is this whole thing about, like, when you're a coach, you get the clients that you need as well. So, you know, we're learning from them as well as us holding space and sort of supporting them on whatever they're going through. And I've definitely found that as well. It's an amazing thing to do, to do, as you know, as our job. And it does come with, I suppose one of the things I don't like is when I see coaches sort of, you know, banging on about this, that, or the other, and I think, yeah, but where's your self-awareness and all that, and where's your work, and where, you know, because I think there are quite a lot. I know I'm treading on dangerous ground here, but you know, I'm not sure all coaches have done a lot of their own work to be able to sit in that space with clients and really hold it for them without their own stuff coming into it.
I think that is, I guess, one of the challenges with I'm kind of reflecting, you know, when I first kind of moved into coaching, I'm going back, you know, kind of 10, 13 years, really. And it was completely new to me. It was, you know, a completely new concept. I mean, wow, I wish I'd have had it, you know, as a late teenager, my early 20s. It would have been, you know, such value. But it was very different when I kind of entered into the kind of coaching work, because it was very much organizational based. It was very outcomes, goals focused. It was very process led. And then over time, obviously, we've changed very much more into, well, where's the human in the process, and how do the two things marry up? On the flip side of that, it's also become a real buzzword, and that there's coaches for this and coaches for that. And, you know, there's a lot of this make, you know, $5,000 overnight kind of, you know,
rubbish.
Yeah, like a lot of magic wands type stuff. So I think there's a definite space in terms of questioning our integrity. You know, I have one of my core values is around integrity, and I have supervision. You know, obviously we're in the coaches network, so I can test things, you know, with my peers, and I have formal supervision, so that it allows me to question how I'm showing up as well, and have someone hold the mirror up to me, which is really really helpful, because there's definitely something around keeping that coaching space as clean as we can. And like you said, so there's no interference, so there's none of our own stuff coming up in that. And that is a work in progress. I think I'd be superhuman to say, you know, that never happens. But I'm much better now at recognizing when I'm able to have a response, or somebody saying something that I can relate to, but making sure that it stays where it needs to.
Yes.
You know, so it doesn't influence my questions, or it doesn't influence, you know, the conversation. And I think that's my worry, is that the coaching sometimes can be still very much in the telling and guidance frame. So when I'm speaking with potential clients, or even just people that ask me what I do, I'm going off on a tangent here, so just bear with me.
Great.
You know, I can remember distinctly somebody saying to me, "Oh, what do you do?" And I explained it. Well, gosh, well, why would somebody pay you to tell, you know, for you to tell them what to do with their life, kind of thing? And I was thinking, so I know coaching is not about that, and that's okay. But there is a perception out there that that's what coaching is. And I think some people probably capitalize on that, and do very much have a very directive guidance, you know, approach to coaching. Whereas I think ultimately for me, it's it's just not about us as the coach. It's about the person, the space, the time.
Yeah.
So I wonder how that will evolve in the coaching industry as time goes on and perhaps more regulation comes in. It'd be, because it's forever, it's growing, isn't it, all the time? The whole wellness, personal development, self-development, gosh, there's development for everything.
There is, and there is, and I think there is a space for it all. I think people are beginning to realize the benefit of it, and especially in this fast-paced world that we've already talked about, where we're go all the time, to have a space that you can just sort of go, okay, land in and go, okay, what's actually really going on for me is invaluable. And it isn't about us, you're right, but it is about us in as far as it's about the relationship that we have with the client. And that's sort of like in life generally, isn't it? It's about those nurturing, safe spaces that we have with our friends, maybe we have it with our family, whatever, where do we have that? And I don't think there's any space you can have actually with friends and family that is totally like the coaching space, unless your friend's a coach, I suppose. But because everyone's always got their agenda or their idea or what they want you to decide. And like I think you said earlier, we're not invested in what the client decides to do, as only as far as we want to help them make. We want to support them while they decide what is the best decision for them. This is all ended up talking about it being a conversation about coaching, but it was inevitable, I suppose, with us too. But it is such and I think it's really important to have that time for reflection. And whether that is with a coach, whether it's in a journal, whether it's whatever work that people choose to do, maybe it's meditation, maybe it's whatever it is that helps you just sort of stop. Maybe it's a long walk on your own or whatever, and a combination of all of those things, but to take that time to just step out of the busyness.
Because it is there's a lot going on in those conversations, and I think it's keeping that definition, isn't it, between keeping the space really free for the other person, for the client to to think freely, and like you say, for us to not interfere in their thought process, whilst taking responsibility for us and our integrity and how we show up. It's like it's like a dance in effect, isn't it? That and I really relate to what you're saying about the family and the friends situation, because quite often people will say to me, when I say, just out of interest, why coaching, why now? Quite often they'll say to me is, well, I've got loads of friends and I've got a great partner and I've got a really supportive family, but I just need to think for myself, and I don't really want their opinion, and they'll just say what they think I want to hear, and a lot of that stuff comes up. So I think that's the value, is just the allowing the thoughts to go where they need to. Which I'm just reflecting fondly on conversations with my family and friends, enthusiasm just to get things moving and get things going, and the intention is lovely, but sometimes we're not ready. Sometimes we might want to explore a different perspective, but we don't know how to, we can't get there because the conversation's moved on. So it's interesting, isn't it? And one of the things that I thought of on the back of what you said you were going to come and talk about, I think I reflected that really, and that's what you're just talking about, that time to connect with our core self. I suppose that's what I would call it. You might use something slightly different, but that inside, for me, that's what got me out of the rut, the massive, deep, bloody big hole that I was in. And it was that sort of core part of me that's like, look, there's more to life than this. Let's just explore what that could be like. And I think so many of us, which I did for many years, was shut that little voice down. That was because we do have all that wisdom inside us, even when we think we don't. It's just, if we know how to listen.
And also sometimes that little voice might be saying things that we don't want to hear because they're uncomfortable, because we don't want to be told that, like me, the 27 years I'd spent in my career, actually, I didn't really want to do it anymore. And battling all those opinions from outside, I was like, whoa, you can't possibly let that go after all that time. And, you know, but that core bit of me was like, you just got to get out. You've just got to get out. And actually what's happened is, interestingly, is I did get out, and I've had 3 or 4 years out of it. And I have dipped my toe back in a little bit. And it's actually going really well, because I'm taking a different me back into that space. So maybe it wasn't like my client, actually, who I was talking about. It's not it wasn't the job that was the problem. It was the me, the version of me, the way my patterns and all the behaviors that I took into that job that absolutely led me to burn out many times. So taking that massive step back has allowed me to sort of tiptoe back in a little bit. It's fascinating, isn't it? I love it. I think all this self-development work and self-growth, and like, you know, which I know is buzz thing, but it's a buzz thing because for a reason, really, that it's for me, it's been life-changing. And have you been on a similar-ish journey?
Oh, crikey. Yeah, I mean, I'm really nodding as you're talking. So 2 things. So I'll answer your question first. Yes, massively. But I have a real fondness for it now. It hasn't been easy, and I think that's the key point, isn't it? Is what you were saying there, is that actually some of that stuff we don't want to deal with. Sometimes we don't want to have to admit to ourselves that maybe we could have made different decisions. What I'm learning over the time is to withhold judgment. So learning to think and reflect without any judgment, which is a real process. And I think this is now, when I look back as kind of, you know, teenager, a little bit off the rails at times would be the polite way to put it. You know, didn't go to university, so that was a real identity thing when my friends did. Spent a long time traveling, 10 years traveling. So a real mixed bag, and then ultimately fell into a career that I absolutely love. And I, really, it's real purpose led for me in terms of my own kind of sense of need for validation, did the certificate side of things, but now I've fallen into a place where I'm a better coach and I can show up properly because I've done my own stuff, which I know is like super cheesy and it's like all about doing the work, but
it is.
Yeah, it is. And I love that with clients, when I'm able to have the conversation, that if I had a magic wand, like I would be in the Bahamas now, like I'd be FaceTiming you from the Bahamas, but I have no magic wand. Like, it's going to take hard work. I'm still doing the work. You're doing, but there's something about seeing that as part of life itself. It's not just really hard work. Actually, this is what it's about. Sure, if we're going to be, touch wood, live until we're 80, 90, 100, crikey, I want to look back and think, did I put the effort in I needed to? Did I really ask those questions? Did I carve out that path for me? And I feel so privileged to even be able to say that. And I mean that because when I look at the generation of my parents and other parents, within that kind of same age bracket, they didn't have the opportunity. It wasn't available. So there was never a time where they would have been invited to share their view or offer some feedback, or did they have an opinion? Through childhood, teenagers, it just wasn't expected. So now when I think about, I'll talk about my mum, for example, it blows her mind sometimes. She's like, how have you got to a point where you're so different, Sarah? You would never have said that when you were 19. And I'm like, no, I'm 43 now, Mum. There's a big gap there, and there's a lot of work. But I appreciate that I've had the opportunity. Like, there was no self-development for that generation. No. I know, we can argue, we'll take responsibility for this, that, and the other, and I get it. But our generation, my generation, hopefully that of the children, become normal now. It's become normal to actually say, you want a career, or you want to, get divorced, or you want to retire. Like, you have a say in what that looks like, how it feels, and ask for some support with it. Those conversations were not taking place in my mum's generation. They just weren't. And it's almost like speaking two different languages. So I hope that by the time my little boy, who's 6, grows up and gets to his late teens, we're a lot more informed and we have much better communication skills to try to work out the direction they want to go in at that point, versus just heading off doing what they think they should do and what everybody else is doing, and then getting to 40 and thinking, holy smokes, now I'm going to do the work.
Yeah. Where have the last 20 years gone?
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I had an amazing time, but on reflection, I didn't enjoy it as much as I could because of some of the stories I was holding on to. So it's hopefully that the younglings that are coming through now will have the space and the skills and the room for those conversations and to question things and challenge things.
Yeah, I think they probably will more so if they want to take that, but they'll probably have their own thing then, won't they? So whatever that is.
They'll just be just coding their way through life, and I'll be like sat in another room somewhere, like no idea what's going on.
You're right, because I'm always like, and I try as best as I can to know a little bit about what's going on about things, and I am really beginning to lose it now, especially as mine are teenagers, so they don't tell me so much, and they're just very scathing about what I don't know, rather than wanting to explain it to me. So I'm kind of it was funny when you were talking then about, because I don't know much about you in the past, and I just got this real like feeling of the free spirit in you that I think I probably knew was there, and I just got that sort of like, I don't know, I felt it. And I think because I'm quite, I'm 54, but I don't, classic, I don't feel 54. I know that's really cheesy, and I don't know what 54 should be like, but people do sort of think I'm a bit childish, more childlike. I'm quite playful at times, and a bit sort of like, well, I am now. God, I never used to be. But I think that's the core of me, is quite playful and quite young. So not innocent, but quite young. And I think it's when we get to the core, we find those things about us. And I think it's been really important to me to try and find space to allow that part of me to come out, even if I can't go off and do exactly what I want to do. How can I find little pockets that I can be like that? And this podcast actually has definitely been a space, or podcasting generally, because I had another podcast before this one, but podcasting is a space for me to come and show up in that sort of part of me, if that's who's around at the time that I'm, and she pops in and out. But also it's a place for me to have my own voice, which is is very much that core part of me. And that this is a real space where I can let that part out. So how can we find places to let that real core part of us out? I think it's quite important.
Hugely. And I think it is, there is a point, isn't there, where you kind of grow up in inverted commas and you leave.
Still waiting for that.
Well, but in in that kind of perceived thing, you grow up, you get a job, you put a suit on, and you come off and you work for 50 years and then you retire, and and crikey, I think when I was younger, it was that frightened me. Like it's got to be more colourful than that. Like there's got to be a bit more adventure in there somewhere.
You're absolutely right. I remember when I turned 21, I had a boyfriend, the only boyfriend I'd ever had. I'd been with him for 2 years, and I realised at my 21st birthday party that loads of the adults there were sort of expecting us to announce our engagement or something, and it frightened the shit out of me. And I then ended up ending that relationship because there was no way I was up for getting married, and like I was doing law and he was an accountant, and I just had this vision of us, and no offense to anybody who lives like this, but I had this, which it was not for me. I had this vision of us living in a detached house somewhere with 2 cars on the drive, a smaller car and a bigger car, and 2.2 children. And I was just like, oh my God, I'm not saying I never wanted that, but I certainly didn't want it in my 20s. yeah, life had to be more colorful than that in a way. Yeah.
But I think that's it's really important what you said there is that, you're not saying that you didn't want it, but you definitely didn't want it in your 20s. But what's missing, and what was missing, I think, in those conversations, well, that there wasn't a conversation, that we weren't able to question it. So then what came out, it was you either did that or, life was kind of completely gone off the axis, hadn't you? There was no actual room for discussion. Yeah, so I think that is what's changing, is that we're allowed now to say it's not for us, actually. No, there's nothing wrong with it if you do want it, but actually it might not be for me, and that's okay too. But it's taken a lot for us to get to a point where we're able to say, well, it's great for you, but no, thank you for me, and go off and explore.
And you make a really good point there. It's only as I said that out loud and then was listening to you that I realized that I don't know whether that's what he wanted. I just got, because there wasn't a space to have that conversation. And I didn't grow up in a household where we had conversations about anything anyway. Lots of my generation, we just didn't do that. And I didn't know what he wanted. So I decided the only thing I could do was end it. And, and there started my tumultuous 20s. But, how different could it have been? And I'll never know, and I don't really have regrets, because I feel all those things that happened have got me to where I am now, and I'm really happy with where I am now. But having space to talk around things as they happen, as we grow older, as we go through life, it is really important, I think, if only so that we can get in touch with that inner bit of us to find out what we really want.
And that is exactly, in a nutshell, when you're talking, this comes up a lot, and I really visualize, that there's certain milestones in life, aren't there, where it's this or that, it's this or that, it's this or that, and one's perceived to be probably the right thing to do, and one's perceived to be the wrong thing to do. So quite often it comes up with clients where there'll be a crossroad, whatever that crossroad might be, and there's the fear attached to, but what if I make the wrong decision? As if we only have the two choices. And again, a little bit of that permission to explore option C, D, E, and F, and, onwards. But what's the bit in between? If you stay in the job that you don't like, or you change career, and then, but what if I change career and that's not right either? Well, that's okay. The permission to change our mind. I've gone full circle here. Sorry, I've gone back to what we were talking about.
That's good. I love it when it comes full circle.
It's a real biggie recently for me, is the permission to say, what if you do change your mind? Like, who says you can't change your mind in 2 years' time? What if you do leave the job that is brought you to your knees, just to get out and get some space and clarity? And what if it doesn't work out? Like with all due respect, if you're going to be working for 40 years, you're probably going to change your mind lots of times. But even that is quite a new concept, because there was a time when you left school, went to uni, got a job, worked till you retired. So now people are like, oh wow, so I could do this now, and then in years' time I could change my mind again. I'm like, that's a possibility, but it can be overwhelming, like you said earlier, when you've suddenly given that amount of space to explore. It's like, wow, down the rabbit hole. And so that's another thing about permission that's just come back to me, is you get to that crossroads, like you could really not even go down one of the paths. You could go off piste if you really wanted to.
You absolutely could. And I think you make a very good point, and you mentioned it earlier actually, about having the permission to look at things and maybe make decisions. And then, maybe with hindsight, I mean, hindsight's a great thing, but you can only make the decision you can make with what the information you have at the time. And so really what you might need somewhere down the line is a bit of compassion, a bit of self-compassion for, well, I made the best decision that I could at the time. And I've been talking lately on the podcast with Robbie, and we did an episode on forgiveness, and it's really, really stuck with me. And every episode I now find myself talking about forgiveness, because I feel that that's been a little bit of the missing link for me, that I can have compassion for myself. I can understand that I made the best decision I could at the time, or whatever. But I think that little forgiveness bit is the added little bit on top to really, it has been for me, the little bit to just free me from whatever's been holding me back in it. Because I can have all the compassion in the world, yes, and understanding and all that, but have I really forgiven myself? And I think that around the permission to explore, make decisions, self-compassion with how it might go, and maybe just think about, is there a little bit of forgiveness sometimes that's needed on the back of knowing that you made the best decision you could, and life changes. I mean, I'm pretty sure you're going to agree with this. If we life's for living, isn't it? And who wants to say that now we know it all and we know what it's going to be like and this is going to be it? Oh my God.
No, exactly. And I really, it's really important, a really important point around, when we get to that point where we're reflecting and, like you, not having regrets, taking that compassionate view of ourselves, not being critical. And again, that often I think is something that can be a barrier. You asked me about barriers before and what gets in the way of people making different choices. It is that we get very hung up, don't we, giving ourselves a hard time. And I think it's really important on reflection that we believe to be like, I made some crazy decisions when I was younger, and I won't say too much about that on the podcast in case my mom's listening. But I've learned to accept that at that time that was the best that I could do, with the knowledge and the skills that I had. I wouldn't make that decision now. But I apply that learning to, therefore, the decisions I might make in the next year. It might not be perfect. They might not turn out how I'd like, but I would like to give myself the grace, that I will probably have done the best that I can. And I'm really trying to teach that to my little boy. I mean, parenting's a whole other podcast to get that. I mean, that's a whole other world crazy. But with him, I keep trying to, explain to him that we're experimenting. And like, I've never been a mum before. You've never been a 6-year-old little boy before. So between us, as long as we keep talking about it and exploring the options, we'll make the best decision we can. And if it's not right, we'll try again tomorrow. Because that is one of the things, is that, there's no point doing things differently if we're going to give ourselves a hard time every time we change our mind. So I mean, loads of stuff there.
And I love that. I love that idea of it being an experiment and bringing curiosity to it, which we've talked about a few times, and I do similar thing with my kids, actually. So mine are now, how old are they? 15 and 16, nearly 7. I've got nearly 17-year-old, which is blowing my mind that he could learn to drive. But, I do often have to say to them, I got that wrong. And I'm sorry, I'm going through every stage that you are going through in your life. I'm going through it for the first time as a mum. So, I got that wrong. And, or, maybe if you could give me a bit more information about that would help me be comfortable with it. That's where I'm at, because they're wanting to go and do their own thing. And I'm like, oh God, okay, can I have a bit more info? And then maybe I'll be. So it's all a big journey, isn't it, Sarah?
Yeah, it is. And I just massively value the ability to stop, take stock, have the conversation, do the reflections, whether that's with a 6-year-old who probably thinks, what are you talking about? I just want to, let's just get the Lego out, versus, working with clients, or, it's, I don't know, I just really value the fact that I'm lucky to have this, we are the skills and the space to do it, because it definitely didn't exist, for my mum's generation. And
no, and so it does for us, so we can embrace that.
Get the most of it.
I think this is a good place to end, and thank you. I knew we'd have a great meaty conversation, and it has been. Thank you so much for your time and bringing all your wisdom and knowledge, and thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I've loved it. I was, to start with, I thought, I'm not really sure what I'll be saying, and then, as usual, off we go. A lively conversation. But thank you very much. It's been great.
You're very welcome, and thanks again. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hi, Philippa here. I was enjoying my conversation with Sarah so much that I totally forgot to ask her where you can find her. So I'm just popping in now to let you know those details. So if any of you are interested in knowing more about Sarah, signing up for her newsletter or following her on Instagram, you can find her online. Her website is sarahgreencoaching.co.uk. So that's Sarah, SarahGreenCoaching. So Sarah with an H, Green without an E, coaching, all one word, sarahgreencoaching.co.uk. And you can also find her on Instagram at sarahgreen_coaching. So go and check her out. Okay, thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to HSP Connection. If you've enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes. Also, we'd really appreciate it if you could rate the podcast and share it with anyone you think might be interested. It helps others find us. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, you can also leave us a review.
To get in touch with us, you can email us at hspconnectionpodcast@gmail.com. And we'd love to hear from you with your thoughts and comments on the episodes and any suggestions you have for future topics and guests.
We are both HSP coaches and speakers. And to find out more about Robbie, go to Robbie Leigh, that's leigh.com.
And to find out more about Philippa, go to safeandsupported.co.uk. See you next time.